I saw something in a poll this morning that I find a little bit troublesome. Maybe you will too. This was a poll conducted by the Economist-YouGov, and in it they asked whether you have a favorable or unfavorable view of a politician you might remember by the name of George W. Bush. Among self-identified Democrats, those very favorable and somewhat favorable numbers add up to 51%. He was not president in 1903. It was not that long ago. Majority approval amongst Democrats. And it leads me to wonder if some sort, like if forget-me-nows have been given to the entire American population or something like that. I mean, look, Democrats are 51%. Obviously, Republicans are higher. They're at 76%. Independents are a little bit lower at 42%, although that is swamped by basically their don't know is much higher. It's at 19% instead of 7% for Democrats. But 51% for this guy, George W. Bush, which has all of his personal issues, obviously the stupidity and the cruelty, like the conversation about the woman that was gonna be executed back when he was governor of Texas, all that stuff. But then the economic impact of his tax cuts, his attempt to privatize some of the massive social programs, the botched response to Katrina, the Iraq War perhaps, the killing of civilians abroad, torture and all of that. I mean, the number of different things that should disqualify him from ever being seen favorably by an American could go on and on and on. We could do multiple programs just on that. And in such a short period of time, less than 10 years from him leaving office, it's at 51% amongst Democrats.
So there's two phenomena here. One is that time heals all wounds. The other is propaganda. So let me explain. When George W. Bush left office, do you remember what his approval rating was?
Oh yeah.
26%.
Yeah.
Right now, even in this poll, Donald Trump's at 37%. In another poll, I saw Trump at 44%. So Bush was far more unpopular than Trump is today. So we have forgotten that the country universally despised George W. Bush by the time he left office. The Iraq War was a debacle of literally historic proportions. Hundreds of thousands of civilians lost their lives. It led to the creation of ISIS. It created chaos in the Middle East, let alone all the guys we lost, over 5,000 and then 50,000 injured, let alone the trillions of dollars we lost. And then there was the economic crash. When he left office, Democrats had him polling at, among Democrats, 7%. And it has jumped from 7% to, as John pointed out, 51% now. So yes, you forget sometimes, right? And he comes out and does a nice speech, which I gave him credit for, against Donald Trump and warning about, the creeping nationalism and warning about white supremacy. Okay, great, wonderful, I'll take it. But it doesn't, it's just real quick, John, but it doesn't wipe away the hundreds of thousands of dead civilians and the 8 million jobs we lost in that economic crash. It doesn't take those away at all.
It doesn't at all. I mean, one thing that could be skewing the numbers a little bit is this was taken just a couple of days ago. That's around the time that he had been involved in some high profile fundraising for people who were affected by the hurricanes and stuff like that. That could be throwing some people off as well, it's entirely possible. But even then, you wouldn't think that it would be that high. Look, some people are young and they weren't necessarily watching politics back during the Bush years. That was really the first period that I paid a lot of attention to politics, in large part by listening to this show actually. But that is scary, and we were having this conversation this morning. To some extent, one of the things that worries me about this is not just that we so easily forget about the crimes of the past presidents. We sort of know that. I mean, even Obama, the bad things about Obama, people are gonna forget that, especially Democrats in the next few years. But the fear that Trump being so horrible, so cruel and so small and so petty might well make almost anyone on the Republican side look like a vast improvement, let alone on the Democratic side. I mean, you could have theoretically, if this strong of an effect is happening on someone as obviously evil as George W. Bush in his effect, he was responsible for more deaths than few people in the history of our world. That now with Trump, I mean, if Mike Pence runs next time, or a centrist Democrat like Joe Biden, like nothing they will have done can possibly make a dent after the experience people will have had after Donald Trump. We could end up with another monster just because the monster is slightly more presentable.
Yes, and so let's talk about the damage too, because I'm worried that Trump could cause even more damage, but he hasn't yet. So if you're just tallying the damage, Bush did a lot more damage.
Can I throw in one fact?
Yes.
So I tweeted about this yesterday. I showed some of the video where he, back during the campaign, said that he repeatedly said you have to kill the families of terrorists. And we talked, I believe, a week ago, the newest numbers by Air Wars show that in the last 7 months, there have been more killed civilians in our fight against ISIS than through the entirety of Obama's efforts against it over the course of multiple years. And so, I mean, that's a smaller number than Iraq, but if that continues for the next 8 years, I mean, it could start to get up to points where it becomes sort of an academic distinction.
No. So I want to be clear. Bush had 8 years to do that damage.
Yeah.
Trump has only had less than a year. Oh my God, heaven forbid we actually have 8 years of Trump. The damage he could do he could easily beat Bush. So, but I don't want to get there. I think the guy's a maniac and a complete danger. That doesn't mean that Bush wasn't also a disaster,
exactly.
Which leads me to the final things here. Look, Bush did do one thing right after leaving the presidency. He did something that I suggest for a lot of the people who get in trouble that they almost never do, which is go hide in a cave.
Yes.
Right, the owner of the Clippers does all these terrible things, says terrible things about black people, and then just keeps doubling down. Go hide in a cave, man. And Bush, he hid in a cave and did some artwork, okay, on the walls.
Paint a dog.
Right, and it worked because people like he wasn't out there and people forgot how bad he was. But the other thing that I want to come back to that's really important is the power of propaganda. The other reason why those numbers have moved up for the whole country and even for Democrats is because of the power of television. So in television, whenever Jimmy Carter's name is brought up, they call him a loser. They say, oh, you don't want to be like Jimmy Carter, a Democrat like Jimmy Carter. And it means it is the equivalent of loser. Now, the reality is that's not remotely true. Jimmy Carter literally did peace in the Middle East. And then every once in a while, they're like, could you imagine if a president was so great that he would do peace in the Middle East? I can, it was called Jimmy Carter. He did the Egypt and Israel deal, and I can go on and on. But the press constantly calls him a loser. He wiped out a disease from off the face of the earth. A loser helping people, doing peace deals and ending disease and saving millions of lives. But when they mention Bush, it's more like, oh, Bush. Oh, God, he does art now. And well, he helps people. Oh, Bush, right? Republicans and oftentimes so-called Democrats on television as well. And so what does that do? It moves Carter's numbers down and it moves Bush's numbers up.
Mission accomplished.
It's almost as if we have manufactured consent that Bush was a good president, when in reality, when he left office, we were all agreed that he was a terrible president. Help us build independent media together. Come join us, tytnetwork.com/join.